I am going to head over to the other side of the pond to a friend of mine, to Rosie Stamp. And I'll call this segment Growing Up Rosie.
Hi.
Hi, darling. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not bad. Hi, everybody.
Nice to see you. So you're in London town, are you? Or
I'm in
close?
London. I'm in London. We've just had a sort of a Thanksgiving dinner almost. I just cooked a full roast and it was very Thanksgiving-esque. And my
Wow.
youngest, who I think is popping in right now. I can't, no, Gracie. She was saying, enough talk of this. Let's say what we're thankful for. And she just did that spontaneously. It was very sweet. So
That is very nice.
yeah.
So I don't know how to properly introduce you. I'll say you're a friend. So this is I should say this is Jeff's place, and I want to give a shout out to this week's sponsors, because I should do that every once in a while. So this week our sponsor is the color purple. The numbers 1 and 8, which together bring life. And for another week running, the letters LOVE have outbid WTNF. So we're sponsored by love, and so that's how we're starting off. And so people may not know you, but you are somebody who, if they did not know you, they might think that you grew up as rock and roll royalty, which you did, but not necessarily in the way that people would think of it, because your dad. He was Jimi Hendrix's manager, and perhaps people may know of this other band that your dad and his friend were famous for discovering and co-managing for a long time, known as The Who. And you, literally being a child of the 60s, have, I call it growing up rosy, but not everything was so rosy. Although I hope and I believe things are better now. But what was it like being at home with your mom and your dad and dealing with these, literally living with living rock legends, although they at that time were just people too? How crazy was that?
It was pretty crazy. I mean, we laughed earlier when we were talking about that, and you said growing up Rosie, and I said, yeah, but there were plenty of thorns.
No, but that would be a great podcast / book / show.
Look, let's do it. Let's do it. It's it was interesting because that was the early dichotomy. Listening to your David just briefly. I wasn't here for all of it, but the big dichotomy for me was I was living a life that when you're a kid, you have no idea of what wealth or status or power or fame is about. You're just living your experience, and my experience of life growing up was that there were no responsible adults anywhere. They were all high, drunk, absent, psychotic. LSD induced psychosis in my mother led to very early abandonment. One of my dad's ex-girlfriends said that when I was 4, she said, Rosie, you should have seen yourself at 4. You were running the entire house.
Wow.
Like there was that sense of like I was immediately self-sufficient because there weren't any
adults,
insert very rude word, MS, doing anything responsible regarding parenting of any kind. And so I'm in a very balanced and resolved place around that now, decades and decades of my own sobriety and therapy and, healing work in. But the issue for me at the time is that other kids and peers of mine would say, oh, I wish I was you. How cool to be you. Your uncle's in Superman, your dad's done this, your mum's in a Beatles song, and I was like, what is wrong with me that my experience is intrinsically dark? There must be something wrong with me that I'm not experiencing this as cool.
But you might have well been the most sane, level-headed person there was, but yet you're dealing with all this pain. And how do you cope with that? It's really hard. It's
I mean, it's you cope with it by surviving first. All those adult child skills that anyone in recovery language might know. I survived by reading books, doing well in school, fantasy life, all of that. Those were my coping mechanisms. And then, very quickly followed by my own drug and alcohol issues. I started drinking at 11, I was being handed joints at 7, it was like, that was the lunacy of it,
Wow.
And so yeah, I coped with it through addiction. That was how I coped with it. Ultimately, I was abused sexually by one of the guys in a smaller band at the age of 4. I mean, it's not, I don't want to get dark, but the underbelly of that world, the 70s were not known for their kind of parenting skills. So many of my friends.
And when you were 15, you were packed up and you were sent to Colombia, right?
Yeah, 15, exactly. My first au pair job was for Andrew, who I spoke to yesterday. Anyway,
for those who don't know, Andrew was the the manager and the producer of the Rolling Stones at that point.
Yeah. So it's I've come to a deep reverential spiritual belief that each soul chooses its own path. I believe very strongly that I chose my parents and I chose that life, and that early contrast and that early difficulty has led me into a kind of a trajectory of inner work that I wouldn't have had otherwise. It's led me on a path of shamanism and soul journeying and understanding, that pain and suffering and adversity can be a crucible and an alchemical tool in that way.
And I'm just curious, but if you had a chance to write a letter to yourself when you were and hit you like that it hit you, that you read it at 9 years old from future you, from now, do you think at that age you would take yourself seriously and take notice of the wisdom that you wanted to share to yourself? Do you feel like you had to experience what you experienced in order to have the wisdom that you got, or would you have been able to hear your own voice and change your path based on your own words?
That's an interesting question, because I do believe that, given the option, if any of us could choose and walk another's path or choose a different path, that we would all inevitably come back to the one that we have walked already. And I can remember being in the front room. We had a gigantic house at that time in Kensington. My dad still had tons of money before his heroin addiction, before being fired by the Who because of his addiction. David was talking about, artists, having their journeys cut short as a result of those demons, and I can remember standing there, and I didn't have the word God, but I had this sense of a divine presence that loved me, and that there was an understanding that there would be a day where all of this would make sense. And I believe that was in me from day one,
Were you able to deal with your addiction? Did you deal with your addiction before your parents dealt with their addiction?
No, that was my dad's real gift. That was his real legacy, because, there wasn't any money left by the time I was old enough to benefit from it. I waitressed every weekend at college, to pay for it all. And I have no regrets about that, because if he'd had any money left at the end, he would be dead. And he knows that, he knew that, so he got sober when I was 15.
And how long did it take for you to address it?
So I was 26 when I got sober.
Wow. And wow, I actually knew that, but I just feel it, and so you address the world now very differently than you did. I mean, you were a light worker. You're somebody who provides hope. You find the light when other people see darkness, and you are someone who's been through so much. And you're right. You're growing up, Rosie. You're finding thorns, but you're finding your path. So what were the breadcrumbs you found that gave you the path to find your light? What do you remember? Like, what triggered you to go down the light path?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I got my dad's influence, at 15, this is where we started to have sort of a relationship. It was never the knight in shining armor who showed back up again, which is what I wanted. But we had a little bit of a relationship, and there were moments where he would say things like, he told me the story, and I've told you this before, where he said that, by the time he was 25, 26, he had everything that he could have possibly dreamed of as a young street kid from London who grew up hungry. He had money, he had fame, he had power, he had a beautiful wife who he loved, and yet he felt empty. He didn't feel successful. And that was part of what fueled, I think, his addiction, because he was like, well, if I'm not happy with all of this, then I'm just completely fucked. What could there possibly be? And so the wisdom of that, he said the image that I got when I was listening to that is that there's this mountain that a lot of people want to climb to the top of because they think the top of that mountain will equal happiness, but people never get there. So they just strive for it thinking, oh, look at those guys up there at the top of the mountain, they must be happy, but he got to the top of that mountain and saw that it was actually meaningless, that all these things. So he had to nearly then die and then found, in a life. And so witnessing that, I think, would be the first breadcrumb for me.
Wow. And for people who are watching that maybe living with abuse right now or living with addiction, and they know they need help, but they don't know what to do, what advice do you give them?
For me, the 12-step fellowships have been like a miracle and saving graces. The fellowship of like-minded addicts and alcoholics. There's a miracle. There's just something absolutely miraculous that happens when you admit the need for help. And that was the thing that was the hardest for me, because as I've mentioned, growing up as this self-sufficient kid who managed to be great at surviving, that's one of the problems, is that when you're a survivor, you're capable. I mean, I was capable, and I got scholarships, and I waitressed, and I paid for it all. And, I drove drunk, but you would never know that I was drunk because I was just keeping it all together. Like you'd hand me your keys, you'd be wasted, but I'd be driving, but I would have drunk just as much, all that kind of the smoke screens of self-sufficiency. And do not look at me. Don't look past this armor, because there's nothing to see back here. I've got it all under control. And so that the breakdown, in a sense, of the pride or the false pride is that one of the beautiful things I heard and learned in AA was that to surrender means moving to the winning side. And that blew me away, because it was not safe to ask for help. If you ask for help, that means you're admitting vulnerability, and you don't admit vulnerability when you've come from the abuse that I've come from. You just don't. So I would say that for anyone struggling, there is help and there is grace and there are miracles, and all you have to do is reach out one hand, and there's 1,000 hands reaching back for you, in the form for me of 12-step fellowships and the kind of grace of all those higher powers behind those people. And it's not about God, and it's not about religion, and it's every single person that comes to those rooms gets their own concept of a higher power to work with. And it's been the entry point for me of incredible miracles. So, addiction and abuse, and that has to be, for me, the first place of port of call is 12-step rooms, without a shadow of a doubt for me.
Wow. And what role does music have in your life now?
Oh, wow. Well, you've initiated me, into my own voice and singing in ways that I'm like, I'm sure I will be very grateful to you one day. I'm still just mostly pissed off at you.
Sorry, not sorry.
But, I mean, music, the funny thing is that I would say I wouldn't ever have I've never actively listened to a Who album. I've never actively put on a Stone album. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah,
yet,
no, I hear you. I mean,
like in my marrow, these songs are in my marrow, and there are these wonderful memories attached to so many of these songs. So music, without me realizing it, has been the fabric of my life as much as abuse or addiction has. You know what I mean? It's just in there.
So had you ever walked into Tower Records and gone to the record section and say, I know these people, like looking at the albums and saying, wait, I know these people, I know those people, I know. No,
it's so weird. No. And really? I got to Bard, right? So I went to Bard College undergrad. I got myself there by, God knows how, but it was meant to be. And I remember there was a guy came up to me and he was like, someone tells me that your dad was the manager of the Who. And I was like, yeah, he was. And he was like, oh yeah? He's like, well, what's his name then? Like, he was like he completely didn't believe me, right? And I was like, Chris Stamp. And he was like, and he literally, he went like that. He was like, and he sat down, and then he told me about my godfather. He told me about my dad. Like, he was literally like a massive Who fan, right? And he knew more about my dad than I did. And this is what people don't understand, is that I grew up on benefits with an aunt who was raising me, hand to mouth. My dad had left for New York. I grew up without paparazzi, without, I didn't understand backstage. You should have seen me at my first gig when I got a pass. you know, Jeff, it was embarrassing, you know. I
Oh,
was
so
overdressed, I was terrified, I was awestruck, you know. It was like I was not cool at all.
you were
You know, it
always
was
cool. You were
traumatizing.
always
No, I
cool.
really wasn't. And so yeah, it's weird. So that was like a kind of out of body experience for me, because he was like literally, I was legend material in his eyes, and I had no idea what that really meant, you know. So it is weird. I'm a bit of a kind of a pauper in the whatever that story is. Do you know what I mean? Like
No,
I
I
grew
hear you.
up
I hear
without
you.
that awareness.
So if we block out all the music that your family was associated with,
Mm.
who do you listen to? Is there any? Do you get messages from music? Do you listen to?
Oh.
Do you like lyrics that resonate with you, with your
Yeah, it's
soul?
lyrics. It's lyrics. It's musicality. I mean, I love, like, it's Alicia Keys, it's Nora Jones, it's, you know, Billy Joel, Elton John, you know, anything with like piano and lyrics, you know, Amy Winehouse, you know, just something that grabs the soul, things that grab the soul, you know, and you can't put words on that ultimately. Ella Fitzgerald, Nina Simone, you know, the classics. But what am I listening to at the moment? Leon Bridges, I've discovered. Do you know Leon Bridges?
I do not, but I
River,
will.
there's a song called River. Oh, it's killing me. I just keep listening to it over and over. So, you know, music is a bridge to spirituality for me. I think it's an ascended
Oh,
experience.
I think music is a bridge to spirituality for many people, but
Mm.
it's also, you know, connects your soul to the world in many levels. Wow. So
Mm.
I will not ask you to sing today. Uh,
Thank you. Thank
I,
you. I
it's not
don't.
that I don't want to hear you, but I will set up a proper time and ask you to sing something when you have notice.
Thank you.
But
Thank
I have great confidence, however, that if we were someplace else and you were to open and sing, you would be marvelous, because your soul resonates, your voice resonates with our souls in such a beautiful way, and it's that vibration that you bring out and the light that you share by not even speaking, but by singing and by being present. That is so special.
thank you. Thank
Wow.
you. I love you for that. I mean, you are helping me in a way, and I know that my singing is part of my next step.
I think so, and it's really for us. It may be therapeutic for you,
Mm.
but feeling it and hearing it helps other people resonate with what's happening, and it's hard to explain. But I know what it felt like being in Sag Harbor, and I was crying when you were singing. I mean, and it was something really special when you did Amazing Grace there, and it was just really something very special about you and what you bring out. And so wow. And so today, so these days, being someone who's dealt with all these things in your past, you're very much living in the present, and you're very much bringing light into this world. Do you have any advice for folks that are, you know, okay, we dealt with on the addiction side, but people that are looking to embrace spirituality or embrace call it light work, or people that are, I call it being trans-spiritual, people that are spiritual on the inside but haven't shown it on the outside, yet they are who they are, but they haven't necessarily come out and said, I really believe in these things. Do you have any advice to people on who want to be more on the light side, but are just haven't gotten there yet?
I think ultimately our society has become, you know, science has become the religion, and logic and rationality, and I believe that can be a trap, because then it's something that we have to see proof of everything. And so it's like, I will go on a spiritual journey when I can see God, or prove to me that there are angels. You know, you've heard some of my stories. I've witnessed angelic beings. I've witnessed miraculous things. I know that there are dimensions other than this one. And I think that the beauty of, you know, in AA, when I tell my story, I talk about this tree, and we're all pieces of fruit. And this tree, the fruit is catching the sun or the sap or the wind or the air, all at different moments. And each piece of fruit is ripening in its own pace. And then the fruit falls, you know, at its moment of readiness. And I think that ultimately that image of like one step towards source divine, and there's 1,000 steps back towards you. you know, and so we call it seeking conscious contact in the 11th step. It means to me that there is always contact with the divine. I've come to understand that we are divine beings pretending to be human for a little while. You know, that the divine part of us is poured into this container. And so anyone seeking that, I would say, start with breath. Start with taking one conscious breath. And if you can picture golden light coming into that breath and exhalation of something of limitation, that's enough for me. That can, you know, bypass anyone's worry about prejudice or walking into a church or a synagogue, or, you know, for me, the divine is within. And for me, the biggest barrier to seeking that divine was that to go within, I have to face my shit, and I have to look at the shadow, and I have to be with myself. And that mostly has everyone running, screaming, you know.
I hear you. No, I got that.
Stuff to look at.
So your movie, of course, will be Growing Up Rosie, ... to Seeking Rosie, and really going through that transition and really to embrace that other side of light, and to but to hear your voice and not be in denial, right? But to accept you and to allow you to be.
Yeah.
And the vulnerability of you is perhaps the most powerful thing of you too, because you are breathing and you're bringing in the light and you're letting go of the light and you're holding on to it. And you know that you're on the right path, and you just feel it with strength. And look, I thank you for your presence here today. I thank you for everything you do, for people who never say thank you to you. I mean, you're an amazing soul. I am grateful to know you.
Me too.
I look forward to a book, movie, show, whatever you want to do. But I think it would be absolutely wonderful to for you to share more when you're ready to. Thank you for sharing your voice. I on behalf of everyone who's here, I just thank you, really, Rosie. You're a blessing for all of us to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone, tomorrow.
Thank you, and much love to you and your family.
Love you guys.
Love you, Rosie.
Thank you, darling. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.